Okay, welcome back. So we're going through May, June 2020, component 13. So same thing, first thing I'm going to do, I'm going to go through the questions that repeat themselves from question paper 11, May, June 2020. I'll ignore those questions, circle the correct answers, and then you can go to those papers for explanations if you need them, that video. So that's question 30, question 26, 23, 22, 17 and 16, 13, 11, and 10. Okay, so we start from 29 then. An economy with a floating exchange rate experiences an increased deficit on the current account balance of payments. What will result from this? So what this is going to do is it's going to affect the exchange rate. Okay, when we have a deficit, what happens is that we have an increase in the supply of our currency on the foreign exchange market. Alright, so deficits will result in us increasing the supply of our currency. Remember, a deficit is essentially, although it comprises of other balances, essentially we can summarize it or simplify it by saying it's exports versus imports, right? And in this case means that we're importing more than we're exporting. So assuming that's happening, what's going to happen is that the supply of our currency that's being released to the market in order to have those imports will increase, and then essentially we'll try and correct ourselves from the current account deficit. So increase in government debt, increase in foreign exchange reserves, and an increase in demand. They won't apply. The increase in demand will happen if we have, for example, depending on our interest rates or depending on the amount of MNCs that want to come into our market, etc., or depending on if our exports are increasing also. Okay, all those reasons are listed. Foreign exchange section, you've got the excellent revision notes which give you a mind map of the reasons why demand and supply will change in a floating exchange. Okay, 28. What change will not increase a surplus on the current account balance of payments? So again, we're going to be looking at, like, essentially we've got four different components. We've got the balance of trade in goods. What would not increase that would be more imports. Balance of trade in services, what would not increase that would be more imports again. And then we've got primary income and secondary income. Okay, so what would not result in a surplus would be an increase in domestic inflation rates. Okay, now why is that? Domestic inflation rates, what's that going to do? So remember, a surplus would be where we're exporting more, right? So if we have an increase in domestic inflation rates, our exports are going to become less competitive, because what we're going to have is the price of our goods and services will become more expensive, so they will become more expensive for people that are buying them in other countries also. An increase in the amount of development aid received will increase the secondary balance, secondary income balance, which would increase the surplus. A decrease in primary income outflows would increase our primary balance, which would increase that component of the balance of payments, and a decrease in the value of imports Again, what would that do? That would change or increase the surplus in terms of how much imports are actually coming in. Okay, what are the effects on price and equilibrium quantity of the imposition of an import tariff on a good? So you can figure this out by drawing a simple demand and supply diagram. Remember that an import tariff is an indirect tax that's placed on an import. So supply will shift to the left, and what can we see happens here? We can see that the price of the product will increase and the quantity that's being traded will decrease. Okay, so C will be our correct answer there. In recent years, some low-income countries have achieved higher rates of economic growth than high-income countries. What is most likely to explain this accelerated economic growth? Okay, increased trade barriers by high-income countries. Okay, that's possible, but it's unlikely to explain why low-income countries would be growing faster than us. Higher ratios of labour to capital in manufacturing industries, that would not explain it. We would expect higher ratios of capital to labour if we were to have economic growth, because capital will be more productive than labour will be. And falling agricultural prices would also not explain it, because that wouldn't explain how we're able to make more goods and services, which is what economic growth is measured by. But if it's easier for low-income countries to transfer modern technology to increase their productivity, they will be able to make more goods and services, which would explain why modern technology can help them to grow quicker than a developed economy could. Okay, real incomes in a country have risen. What situation would definitely have caused this? Okay, so what we're going to be looking for here, what would cause real incomes to go up? If we have deflation, the purchasing power of individuals will increase, the real value of money will increase. So we're looking for price level to go down, and we're obviously looking for salaries or money income to have increased. Okay, so which situation matches that? That will be B. Okay, 21. A government has a contractionary fiscal policy to reduce inflation, so we're trying to move AD to the left. What will the government increase? So remember, fiscal policy is the use of taxes and government spending. Expenditure on infrastructure, that would be a supply side policy designed to increase AS. Personal tax allowances, that might be a redistribution of income policy. Unemployment benefits would be a transfer payment. Okay, but they're not fiscal policies, it's only the use of taxes and government spending. So if we increase income tax rates, what does that do? That moves AD to the left by reducing the amount of money that people have so that they've got less money to spend. Okay, question 20. A country has full employment. What policy is most likely to lead to a fall in economic growth in the short run, but an increase in economic growth in the long run? Okay, so lowering the retirement age, what's that going to do? That is going to mean that we have less people working, right? So, are we going to produce more goods and services? No, we're not, because we'll have less people available in the labour force. So will it lead to a fall in economic growth in the short run? Sure, it will, but it's not going to lead to an increase in the long run, because in the long run we will still have less people working. However, if we raise the school leaving age, in the short run, we'll have less people working. But in the long run, what are we going to have? We're going to have people with better skills, better experiences. So people with better skills, etc. What does that equal? That equals being more productive in the long run. Once the effects of raising the school leaving age increases the education that the average person would receive. If we sell assets owned in other countries, that's not going to have an effect. And if we restrict the immigration of key workers, again, that will lead to a fall in growth in the short run, but it's also going to lead to a fall in the long run. It's not going to allow us to make more goods and services over a long period of time. Okay, question 19. A government is not allowed to increase its military spending. Government spending is currently at X. Which diagram illustrates a possible change in government spending? So again, what we're looking for here is a reallocation of resources. Okay, we're going to be moving resources from military to non-military spending. Okay, so we're looking for the curve that will show us non-military spending is higher. So if we look at B first, that's wrong because we can see we move from non-military to more military spending, and we're told we're not allowed to do that. It's not going to be A because a reallocation resources is a movement along the curve, not a movement from inside to on, and not a movement from on to inside either. So our correct answer will be D because we can see we move from making more military goods to now making more non-military spending, or spending more on non-military goods. Whereas for C, we can't do this because Y is not an achievable point on our curve. We would have to increase our quantity and quality of resources in order to be able to make at point Y. And we don't have the level of resources at the moment because we can see our PPC line is here, not out here. Okay, simple question for 18. What is the main aim of supply side policy? The main aim of supply side policy is to increase AS. And why do we increase AS? To try and increase economic growth by raising productivity. So, providing education and training, like a couple of questions ago, what's it going to do? It's going to increase the skills of workers, and in the long run, that will make people more productive. We'll be able to make more goods and more services by doing that. Okay, supply side policy has nothing to do with balance of payments, nothing to do with government budgets, and nothing to do with money supply. That's monetary policy. It's all about just the definition of supply side, increasing AS, trying to give us more room to experience economic growth. Okay, 15. A government owns and runs an airline. What combination of ownership and sector is this? So first of all, for ownership, if the government owns it, that means that it's got to be the public sector. Okay, and then we need to answer the question of, is it secondary or is it tertiary? So what's an airline? Tertiary, remember, is a service, and secondary is a manufacturing industry. They're running an airline, so what are they doing? They're providing a service. That service being able to fly. So it will be the public sector with, the ownership will be public sector and the sector will be tertiary. They're providing a service by operating an airline. Manufacturing would be if they're making something. So manufacturing, we think about our factories and the production of goods and services. 14. Firms can grow by increasing the internal scale of their operations. What might be a disadvantage of this to the firm? Okay, average costs to fall, that would be an advantage, so we know that that's going to be wrong. Markets becoming global, that would be another advantage. It gives us more opportunity to export our goods and services to other countries. And labour being replaced by robots, it's an odd option, but it would also be an advantage because it's going to make us more productive. Capital is more productive than labour. A disadvantage would be that it may become difficult to motivate workers as we increase the scale of the operation. Workers may move into specific jobs where they get very skilled at those jobs and they get a lot of experience, but those jobs may become very repetitive and it may be difficult to continue to motivate them. Okay, question 12. A firm produces 1,000 units and has a total cost of $50,000. Variable cost per unit is $40. What's the total fixed cost? Okay, so what we need to do, our total cost is given and our variable cost per unit is given. We need to calculate our total variable cost first and then take that away from our total cost and we'll be left with whatever our total fixed cost would be. So 1,000 multiplied by 40 will give us $40,000 as our total variable cost. Total cost is 50 minus our total variable gives us $10,000, which has to be our total fixed cost therefore. Okay, question 9. What is an advantage to a country of having an efficient commercial bank system? Okay, the first one, it controls the money supply. That's wrong. That's the central bank. That is not the commercial banks. Okay. Discourages spending. That's not an advantage, that's a disadvantage. We want people to spend money, right? And we also definitely don't want them to tax evade, so to not pay their taxes. But what an advantage would be is if it enables investment to come into the industry, okay, or to come into the country even. So having an efficient commercial bank system may allow multinational companies to come to our country and to be able to obtain loans in that country and therefore to be able to make investments which will benefit the economy of the country where the multinationals are locating. Okay, and question 8 is very similar here. If I can just show you from the one we talked about previously, from 14. What's a disadvantage to employers of switching to production using division of labor? So, average cost decreases is not a disadvantage, it's an advantage if they can achieve economies of scale. Repetition of tasks saves time. Again, that's an advantage. Saves time, they're going to become more productive for the workers. And training time decreases. Again, what is that? That's an advantage for the firm or for the employer. They have to spend less time training their employees. Disadvantage, flexibility of workers is lost. So what do we mean by that? What we mean is that, like, if the workers are now working on a specific task, they may lose the skills and the experience that they had before they had division of labor, so they may only be able to do one job. So if someone is sick or someone is out, it may be harder to take a worker from another area and get them to do that job for that day, because they'll only have been focused on or have the knowledge of the job that they're doing specifically. Okay, question 7. Price elasticity of supply of good X is 0.1. the good suddenly becomes very fashionable, leading to a large increase in demand. What would be the likely outcome of this change in the short term? Okay, so we've got to remember the price elasticity of the good is 0.1. That's highly inelastic. So our supply curve is going to look something like this, right? Very close to perfectly vertical. Now, if we have a large increase in demand, if I can just draw a demand curve here, we're going to have a shift in demand, right? And what's going to happen? Because our PES is very inelastic, it's hard for us to increase the supply, right? But if we can make it slightly more elastic, what we'll see is what happens here. We have a very large increase in price and only a small increase in the output. Okay, so I'll just put in the lines here for you to clearly see that. And we can see the big increase in the price of the product and the small increase in the output of the product. Okay, so all of those other options are irrelevant because we can see it once we know the shape of a very inelastic supply. Okay, question 6. The diagram shows changes in the market conditions for coffee. What diagram shows the effect of a poor harvest of coffee beans? So, what we're looking for here is a poor harvest of coffee beans means that the supply is going to be highly restricted. So the supply curve is going to shift to the left because it becomes harder for us to make coffee beans. So all we have to do is find the diagram that shows supply shifting to the left, and we can see here that that would be shown in A. Okay? If you're still confused with these simple demand and supply questions, you need to recap on your factors that will shift supply and your factors that will shift demand. Okay? A shift to the right in supply like B here would be due to, for example, a decrease in the cost of production, and then a reason why demand might increase might be an increase in consumer incomes, therefore a reason why they might decrease might be a decrease in consumer incomes. Okay, question 5. What is a function of the price mechanism in a market economy? Okay, so remember, what's the price mechanism do? It allocates resources to meet demand and supply. Okay, so very easy. What does it do? We just have to know the definition of a price mechanism. It allocates resources and guides the choices. What do we mean by guiding the choices? Based on how much is being demanded or how much is being supplied, it will provide a signal to the producers of whether they need to increase their supply or decrease their supply. Okay, price mechanism has nothing to do with governments providing price stability. It has nothing to do with the markets operating fairly. It makes them operate efficiently, not necessarily fairly. And it doesn't prevent competitors from entering a market. That's something government can do, and the government is not involved at all with the price mechanism. Okay, question 4. What are both macroeconomic decisions? So we're looking at what will affect the whole economy. So for A is wrong because a school recruits more teachers. Teachers do not affect the whole economy, so that's a micro decision. Household cuts its energy use, that's also a micro decision. Remember, microeconomics is the study and behavior of individuals, firms, households, and individual markets. So a household cutting its energy use is the behavior of a household. Macroeconomics is something which affects the whole economy. So therefore we can see for B and C, for decision 1, they're both macroeconomic decisions. But for C, a farmer deciding which crops to grow, that's an individual market. Whoa, sorry about that. That's an individual market, so that's also microeconomic. But a government deciding to spend more on defence, that will affect the whole economy. So that is a macroeconomic decision. Okay, 3. Very simple. Farmer decides to grow potatoes instead of wheat. What is the opportunity cost of growing the potatoes? So what is he losing out on? Straight away, anything that's to do with potatoes can be taken out, because the opportunity cost is the next best alternative that he's given up, and he has given up the amount of wheat or the revenue that he could have made from making wheat instead of potatoes. Okay? Opportunity cost of potatoes is what you give up, and in this case he has given up making wheat. Okay, the diagram shows a shift in a country's PPC. What causes a shift from X to Y? So, straight away, we can see here that X to Y is a shift to the right. So what does that mean? That means that we have had an increase in the quantity and or the quality of resources. Okay, so that's what we're going to be looking for. A fall in the unemployment rate does not increase the quantity and or quality, it just means we use our resources more efficiently. So in that case we would move from inside the curve to on the curve. Right, but that hasn't happened, we've had a shift. Fall in consumer demand, that's not represented by a PPC. PPC just shows the maximum output of two goods and services in an economy. And a rise in the rate of inflation, that's also not shown by a PPC, that's measured through CPI. But if we have a rise in the size of the labour force, we're going to have a higher quantity of labour available to work, which means we can increase our productive capacity. We can make more goods and services if we have more workers available. Okay, a natural resource was discovered in a country. The exploitation of this resource allowed the country to double its gross domestic product within 10 years. Why did this not solve the basic economic problem? Okay, so because wants still exceeded the resources available to meet those wants. Right? All we have to do is remember what the basic economic problem is. Limited resources, unlimited wants, scarcity, choice, opportunity cost. Okay? I've given you that in numerous other papers. Every time that's what we're looking for. We're looking for something relating to unlimited wants, which in this case we're told the wants are exceeding the resources available. So this is indicating to us that resources are limited and that wants are unlimited. Okay? Basic economic problem is nothing to do with GDP, nothing to do with exploitation of resources, and nothing to do with expenditure on capital equipment. It's just those 5 terms I've given to you there. And every question for basic economic problem, we can answer them just using those simple 5 explanations. Limited resources, unlimited wants, scarcity, choice, opportunity cost.